You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode, we're talking about the British science fiction comedy action film Attack the Block, directed by Joe Cornish and released May 11th, 2011.
Ooh, this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, this is the first time I saw it, but I really did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun.
I thought you might. I'm looking forward to diving in and discussing it and hearing more about what you thought about Moses and Sam and some of the other characters. And about those cool alien monster creature things that were the star of the show.
Yeah, I have a lot of notes on them, but I didn't know what to call them, so it's just interchangeable alien, monster, creature. Through all of my notes, just whichever one came to me first. That's okay.
You could always call it what, let's see, who was it that said it?
Pest said it first if you're thinking what I'm thinking. The
Yes.
Big gorilla wolf motherfuckers.
Yes. Yes. You can always call it what Pest did. Pest was my favorite character.
Same.
But we're going to get into all that.
I will. Off the bat, just same. I love Pest. He's great. My favorite.
Oh, so good. All right. Well, I don't think that we should sit here waiting. I think we should just dive right in.
All right.
So I'm just going to dig into a little behind the scenes stuff that we normally go through on Run for Your Lives. The film was shot across London. They did 6 weeks of night shoots. This was the directorial debut for Joe Cornish, who also wrote the script. Cornish used a lot of unknowns, kids from drama clubs, kids from local schools, etc. This was the film debut for John Boyega, who plays Moses, who is now very well known as Finn from Star Wars The Force Awakens and subsequent films. He was also in Detroit and Pacific Rim Uprising. But most people don't get past that first one. This was also the first film for composer Stephen Price, who went on to win an Oscar for Best Original Score for Gravity. It also stars Jodie Whittaker, who is now the 13th Doctor. The film itself takes place on Guy Fawkes Night, which is November 5th. Anyone who watched V for Vendetta will remember. Remember the 5th of November. And the budget was £8 million. It only grossed £4.1 million at the box office. Did not do as great at the box office, but was praised critically for the direction of the film and Boyega's performance. It has a 90% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so it is getting some love somewhere. And it clocks in at about 88 minutes. Pake, I think we're ready for the synopsis.
All right. This one was fun, because I just steal these from online, so at least I admit to it. This one was fun. This is an unlucky young woman and a gang of tough inner-city kids make an unlikely alliance to try to defend their turf against an invasion of savage alien creatures, turning a South London apartment complex into an intergalactic war zone.
Love that synopsis. I think it's perfect for what actually happens in this film. Anyone's going to know what they're getting into as soon as they read it or hear it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and dive into the movie, talk about it, because there's a lot to talk about, a lot of fun stuff.
I know, and I feel like we already kind of gave our initial thoughts before we dove in, so I don't think we need to go back to it. I think we can just dive in and do what we do best, which is go through the characters.
All right. Sounds perfect. And we'll start with, probably just makes the most sense to start with, like, the main character. If you have to give a lead role, main character, it's got to be Moses, played by John Boyega. So, yeah, let's talk about him a little bit. And I was already pretty stoked. Again, I haven't watched this movie before, but knowing the cast and looking at the cast list, I was really stoked to check this out because there's a lot of names that are pretty fun in here. So I was like, all right.
Absolutely. So we meet Moses, and I think he's really this tough guy that is leader of his little gang. They never really say what the gang's name is.
No.
when Sam is walking into the neighborhood where she lives, and we'll talk about Sam in a minute, all of their names are graffitied on the wall together, like they're one big gang, but I still couldn't see like what the name of the gang was that they, or what they called themselves. And so Moses is the leader. Mm-hmm. He kind of runs the show. I think that he, he's young. He's only 15. We learn a little bit later in the film that he's only 15 years old. But yet he's acting much older. Mm-hmm. But he sleeps in a bed with cartoon sheets.
Yeah, with little army men stuff set up on a TV.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, we'll jump around the movie a lot because that's kind of a big reveal at the end, but that's fine. Hopefully people watching, have seen the movie and listening in, then there's not really anything to spoil. But yeah, I think kind of the big reveal on that, because I was wondering, because they show, there's a scene where they're all hopping into their different flats and, having a little, interaction with a family member or something in there. And then it gets to Moses at the end of that little scene, and you see him standing in front of his flat door, and then he opens it, and then that's it. They don't show what's inside. They don't show him. And I was like, that's going to be important. And so finally, when you get that reveal that he practically lives alone. He says his uncle lives with him, but he's always gone.
Yeah.
And he knows he's not there then. And so it's just this, he says his bedroom is still very much like a kid's bedroom. And he just hasn't had time to he's trying to survive. He's raising himself basically. And so he's having to act tough on the outside and everything. But on the inside, he's still this little kid who never really had a childhood and wasn't, didn't have somebody raising them and caring for them. So that inner child is still trying to thrive, but he's also trying to survive, and he's kind of turned into this hardened criminal just because he has to. So when we see them at the beginning of the movie, I was just I was kind of hard on them, because even in my notes, I'm just stupid, petty crime, mugging women at night, breaking into cars for stereos. It's what is wrong with these kids? Get your shit together. This is not a way to live. And I'm, without making too much of, because, some kind of talk about inner city poor versus rich and the lives and, path that sends people down. Because I feel we get down a rabbit hole on that, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's one of those things I don't condone the behavior and the actions of these kids, but at the same time, we do find out that the reason he's doing this is he has to have money, has to survive, because he's too young to work. He's too young to really, so that's why he's dealing drugs. That's why he's stealing. That's why he's trying to survive. Whether or not you believe that's the right way to go about it, that's not really up for discussion in this movie. It's giving you that's who this character is.
Yeah, I feel he had to learn to hustle at a young age, and he's just been out there with his group of friends, and they've just been working together. They live at Wyndham Estates, which is the name of, quote, the block that they live in, and I feel they were very close-knit group of friends who had each other's backs. And it wasn't really about right and wrong. It was about survival and what they needed to do in order to make it. And I don't get the feeling that all of the kids were in desperate need of being out there hustling. I do wonder if, in some cases, they were really just out there to support Moses and be with him.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell, because we didn't get a lot of backstory into each of the characters. But they do have a lot to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But yeah, so that's where we first see them is, the character of Sam, played by Jodie Whittaker, has found herself in this unlucky position of walking down the street in a kind of a quiet, lonely area at night, and she gets cornered by Moses and his gang of kids here. And she doesn't really see their reactions because they all have their bandanas and stuff covering their faces.
Yes.
But, we kind of come to find out, they're just as scared as she was. They're just doing what they feel like they have to, but they do. They mug her. They take her money, her wallet, her phone, her engagement ring, or whatever.
Yeah.
And, and then they kind of leave it to that when she leaves, because she gets away after this meteor, or what it seems to be a meteor, slams into the car next to them. Which then Moses takes advantage of that, instead of being scared or freaked out by that, being oh, now I can get into the car and take the stereo. Very opportunist.
It takes the attention away from Sam, so she's able to really get away.
Yeah.
And then she gets back to Wyndham Estates and goes and stays with this neighbor. And then she talks with the police and describes the people and the kids in the gang.
Yeah.
And is able to really communicate to the point where they go out, the police go out and find the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things really start to go a bit off the rails.
Oh, yeah. Man. They're some tough kids. Like,
yes.
They don't just act like hard asses.
No, they are.
They can back it up. Like, they've been out on the streets. They know what they're doing. To the point where they easily, I mean, come on, Moses like sliced one with a samurai sword, one of these aliens.
I know, that was so good.
Which was so cool. And everybody just like, who was it? I wish I would have marked down exactly who made the quote. I feel like it was probably Jerome or Dennis, one of them was just like, Moses, you ninja.
Yes. I loved that. He was really Moses really was the perennial badass of the group.
Yeah.
But I feel like they all were ready to step up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they realize, when Moses is trying to take the radio from the car, he's kind of pushed back by this creature that is in the car.
Yeah.
And the creature scratches him.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets these 3 scratches across his face. And they all run to what looks like some sort of child's playhouse.
Yeah. It's that tough, outer shell of them. They're like, I don't know what that thing was. I don't know. But it's like,
right.
But it's like, this is our turf. And it's not going to attack me and get away with it. So now we got to go kill it. And we
got to defend our turf. Yes. And that was the thing. I feel like it was a lot of pride. Mm-hmm. Like they knew that was their home. That was their turf. And they were going to defend it no matter what. But it also was about, what is this thing? And we need to figure it out. So they run and chase after it to that little clubhouse place. I mean, they grab it, they take it back, and that's when we start to meet some of the other characters in the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like at first we're really given, okay, here's Sam, who's this really nice, she's just out of nursing school. She, just moved to Wyndham a couple of months ago. We learn that later on that her boyfriend is working as a volunteer for the Red Cross in Ghana. And that all came about through a humorous conversation she had with Pest.
Yeah. Why can't he help kids in Britain?
Yes. And when he asked that question, I'm just like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a common thing that people would want to know. It's like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. We need to help and focus on the things that are happening here.
Yeah.
So it's really, Sam, I felt bad for her at first when they were mugging her and taking all of her stuff. But I feel like she really started to stand up and be a bit more tough throughout the movie.
Yeah. Because even though she's like teamed up with them the whole time, and it's funny because again, Pest has like some of the greatest lines, but like even being like, yeah, we mugged her, but then she did this and then we did. So now, she saved our lives and then she helped me with my leg. So now we're even. We're best friends now. We're friends and it's all cool. Like, but she's like, I wouldn't go that far. Like, you still stole my ring and my phone and my money. To our love, it's like, we saved you. And she says to Moses, oh, my fucking hero.
Yes.
Like,
I remember
very sarcastically, very like, yeah.
Yeah, Moses is like, don't you want to thank us? And she's like, my fucking hero. And it's just like, I mean, and Dennis even apologizes to her because at that point she's in the back of the bully van.
Yeah.
Which I learned that bully is cop.
Yeah.
The language was really researched for this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to production notes.
Uh-huh.
But the director really did a lot of research to make sure that the slang and the language in this film was realistic and, generally what was used in that area. So I had to learn what some of the terms were as I was watching the movie. I've seen it a bunch of times already, but this is the first time that I actually sat down and said, okay, well, I'm really going to have to pay attention and learn what some of the slang means. And bully means police.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the cops have been attacked. They've rescued Moses. And poor Sam's in the back of that police van. And Dennis is driving.
Yeah.
Dennis.
I guess he's the most likely to drive. He has that little like Vespa, that pizza scooter that he's been driving around in.
Yeah, and it's funny because he apologizes to her and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry for my bad driving. I'm getting lessons for Christmas." And I'm just like, 10 minutes ago, you mugged her. All of this craziness has been going on, and now you're just apologizing for the bad driving.
Yeah.
Okay. It just is typical. I think you look at it and realize these are just kids.
Yeah.
They might be tough and trying to show how tough they are, but they're really just kids.
Yeah.
They're teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she sees them as teenagers. Even when they're like mugging her, she knows they're teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that
some of their voices still quite give it away. Not to like, it's not like a knock on them. It's like, I mean, like Biggs is like still, he's not done with puberty yet. Like
no, I don't think so.
Has quite an unmatched high pitched voice for the way he looks. You're like, oh, you're a child, and that's.
Yes.
I even have that in my notes with like a lot of the gang. I was like, this gang is just a bunch of children.
Yes.
There's like legit children acting like hard asses and sometimes being able to back it up, but they're still having to like call in and check in on their like with their moms and their curfews.
Yeah.
Like it's very.
I promise, Mom, I'll be home at 10. Or 10 minutes, Mom, I'll be back in 10 minutes. And I'm like, you're not going to be back in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling these stories to your mom, and by now she must have heard it a million times, and you never live up to when you're supposed to be home.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like they were telling these lies to their parents about what they were doing. They certainly weren't going to tell them that they were out chasing gorilla-like looking aliens with no eyes.
Yeah.
I feel for Sam because I feel like she's having the worst night of her life. All of these things happen. She finally gets away from them, goes back to her apartment, and before she can even get in the door, they're all there.
Mm-hmm. And that's, things like, so I was like, I guess Sam lives here in Wyndham too. And I was like, yeah, everyone's here. Like, this is the block. This is the block. And it's funny that, they have a conversation later on about this. Like, if we would have known that you lived here too, we wouldn't have mugged you. It's like, oh, really? Like, because.
Yeah. They're proud of the block. They don't want to hurt anyone in the block. They just want to hurt or steal from those who are outside the block.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't realize that. I mean, they would come up with these one-liners to say to her. When she first gets into her apartment and they chase her in there, she runs straight to her bedroom, closes the door, grabs the guitar and walks out, tells them to get out. And they are just looking at her like, yeah, whatever.
Okay,
we're not going to.
Sure. Yeah.
We're not paying attention to you. Have you seen what's outside?
What are you going to do? Sing us a ballad? like, no.
It was just great. Oh my gosh. So crazy.
Which I do love that scene there, while they're in her apartment. And because even though she's like so over it and fed up with these kids, like they talk to her like better senses and her good nurse instincts do kick in. She's like, fine, I'll give this kid a check. Like I'll look at his leg and like,
Yes.
And it ends up being a really like fun scene between her and Pest because like she knows that he's like having a rough time of this right now, but she's still giving him a hard time.
Yes.
Which I think is funny. And he being just Pest is flirting with her, we could just take my pants off. And she's like, no, that's not necessary. Like,
He's talking about his fresh, clean boxers he put on.
I got nice boxers on. I got some Calvin Kleins. Like, no, it's fine. I don't need to see that.
No.
But she gives him that hard time. It was like, tell me if this hurts. And he's like, try me. Just acting all tough. And she moves his ankle. Hurts. Like, immediately hurts. Yeah. Well, how about this? And then it goes again. Hurts.
Yes.
She even like, she's fed up with Dennis still being a dick to her. And so she gets the little pillow and like throws it down on him. And he's like, don't take it out on me.
I loved it. Oh my gosh. It was great. It was so great. Oh, so many good things. Yep. So many things. I mean, we could have done this entire podcast about the quotes that happened in this movie. Because there were just so many great ones.
Yes.
So I feel like we could have done that. But we're not. We're sticking to our character-driven discussion.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked a little bit about Pest. I feel like we could talk a bit about the group as a whole. Like, we have Moses, who's the leader.
That's kind of what I have is like one of my character notes is just literally like the rest of the gang that's not Moses.
The rest of the gang.
Like, that's, like, they all are great in their own ways, but like, they work well as a unit, and so it's easier to kind of cover them that way. Yeah.
There's so much. There's just so many things. I mean, when they go, first we have Pest, who we've talked about.
Pest is the very funny one, obviously. Like, he's the Joker of the group.
Yes.
Biggs is like, he's fearless.
Yes.
Even though he spends most of the movie hiding in a paper
dumpster.
bin. But like, but it's still, I view him as fearless. Like, he wants to make that jump. He wants to, but he's not like dumb in the sense of like, he's not going to just like put himself in like a suicidal situation leaving that bin. But like, but he's caring too. Like, the whole time he's like on the phone with different people trying to like reach out to them and make sure they're okay and like try to get some help for himself at the same time. But,
yeah. I like that early on in the movie we see Biggs, like, he's going to make that a jump from this higher up walkway down to the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerome kind of pulls him back and is like, no, he doesn't say anything, but it's kind of like, no, you're not going to do something so stupid.
Yeah, Jerome is like the very like level-headed thinker of the group. He seems to be more like, like, oh, we could just like hop off the rails and do this, but like, let's actually think about what we're doing for a minute.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like he was kind of the grounding member of the group.
Yeah.
And that was one instance where he just kept Biggs from jumping.
Yep.
And hurting himself.
I could make that jump. I know you could.
Yes. And we learned later that he could.
Oh, Biggs can make that jump when it counts. Yeah. I was excited.
Needed to make it.
I was excited with that scene. I was like, yeah, do it. He was like, he's going for the jump.
Do it.
Yeah, he made it.
Yeah, he made it. Yeah. So, Biggs was the youngest one of the group. Jerome is the level-headed one. Dennis, I feel like, was a hothead.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like he spurred Moses on to do better. He was kind of like the devil on Moses' shoulder. Like, pushing him, I think, sometimes to do something.
Definitely.
A little more action-oriented.
Which he was another great face to see in this, because I had seen him before. Because that is, he was played by Franz Drama. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I tried looking it up, watching interviews and panels with him. I couldn't figure out a solid answer. But, that's fine. But, because I know him from the CW DC's Legends of Tomorrow, where he played Jefferson Jackson, or Jax, who was him and Victor Garber's character made up like the two parts that formed Firestorm, which is pretty cool.
Oh, cool. So anyone who watches this movie that may have watched Legends of Tomorrow will get a chance to see a familiar face in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis, he was, not a great driver. Had that poor little dog Pogo.
Aw.
R.I.P. Pogo. Yeah. I knew that was going to happen. It's like I forget every time I watch the movie, and then I see it, and it's like, oh, always forget about poor Pogo.
Yeah. I had a dog named Pogo once. I did.
Oh, Pogo was a very cute name. I mean, listeners, I think you already know how we talked about it when Rima was on, when we did Jaws. I've said it a couple of times. When it comes to animals in movies like this, I get real, like, testy when anything happens to them. So it was a little sad to see. Poor little Pogo he thought he was chasing something else. And that did not work out real well for him.
Mm-hmm.
So disappointing. One of the things that stood out to me too about Jerome, he had the wildest comment when they saw the first male of the species creature. When they saw the first male creature of the species, and basically saying the alien's black is too black to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were all talking about how it was darker than anything they'd ever seen.
Yeah.
It's
it was
so
like this
black.
Vanta black kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's super dark. They couldn't see it. All they could tell is the teeth kind of glowed, and it didn't have any eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a striking creature.
Yeah. Very interesting looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there are I'll say 2 more unofficial members
Oh,
of this gang, which I thought was actually kind of fun.
They're on the young side.
Yeah, you have Mayhem and Probs as they go by. Their names that the older kids weren't going to give them that. I was like, no, you have not earned these names, and this is like you're just little kids. Like, don't.
Yes. Mayhem admits at one point he's 9.5 because I think Sam looks at him and says, "What are you, 7?" It's like, no, I'm 9.5. And Moses, even though they always wanted to join in, Moses actually tells them, you need to go home and stay inside.
Yeah, go home, stay inside, do your homework.
Stay safe. You wanted them to have that moment in the movie where they actually do something that proves that they are tough guys. Mm-hmm. And we did get to see that.
I loved it. They have Probs has his super soaker. He was like, what are you going to do? Spray it? And I was like, it's not water. And then I was like, what are they doing? And so, yeah, I love it. It's like this gas or flammable liquid that he's got in it. And it works out great. It's a great idea. Flammable liquid. And then Mayhem has his firecrackers. Put those things together and they can set the monster that was stalking and hiding out on Biggs. Take him out and let Biggs. They would let him out of the bin, but then the cops show up. Fuck,
so they're all of them. So they're all in the bin hiding. So and Biggs actually validates their names. Yep. He doesn't call them by their names, that their given names. He calls them, well, you're Mayhem and you're Probs. Mm-hmm. And so he's validating them as actual, maybe not members of the gang, but members of,
it's respect.
Tough guys. Yeah. It's like, tough. You guys are tough. You guys are legit. You guys are the real deal. Mm-hmm. And I liked that. Yes. I really, really liked that. It was hilarious, though, and you mentioned it just a second ago. Mm-hmm. They're expecting more monsters, and they see the police, and they just... I think it was Mayhem that just looked at them and said, fuck. Mm-hmm. And then they ran and jumped in the dumpster.
Yeah.
Which I think Biggs was probably happy to have somebody in the dumpster with him because he was in there for such a long time.
He'd been there quite a while. Even if it's Mayhem and Probs, he's happy to have some company at this point.
Exactly. Well, they have the super soaker. They have the firecrackers. They did take care of that creature. So they're doing better than what Biggs is, although he did do a lot to call everyone.
Yeah.
Although I did find it funny when Dimples, a friend of his that's one of the girls, tells him to call her later when he's not playing Xbox.
Yeah, because he's panicked and he's scared, and so he's just talking a million miles an hour. Like, oh my god, I'm stuck here in this, I'm stuck in the dumpster, everybody's there, and there's aliens everywhere, and I don't know what to do. It's just like, what? Okay, I don't know. I don't know. Slow down. I don't know what you're saying. You're too excited about a video game or something. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. I loved that. I just thought that was great. Those girls, too, they didn't have any trouble, putting the guys in their places either.
No, not at all.
They were just like, you guys, you think you're tough, and you go and do all these things, and trouble follows you everywhere. Tia especially was giving them a hard time, especially Moses, just saying, you're all about being a blade and robbing. This is what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that actions have consequences, and everywhere you go, trouble follows.
Yeah.
They didn't have any trouble giving it back to them and being hard and harsh with them. And I liked that because they were pretty tough unless they thought the puppet was chasing them, and then they kind of went off on their own. They got a little bit scared then.
Yeah.
Just a little bit scared. But there was one scene that I really liked with them. When they were all at, I think it was Tia's house, or flat, and the creatures were breaking in, and they were all just going off on him, and Dimples grabs an ice skate, and is stabbing it in the head, and I'm just like,
okay,
all right, I get you, yes, do that. And they were just being tough, trying to kill them, and it was incredible. And that's also when we see Sam start to save the boys.
Yeah.
Because there was one that was going to get Moses, and she just stabbed it with a knife right up through the throat.
Yeah.
And saved his life.
Yeah, while his samurai sword is stuck in the wall behind him.
Oh, my goodness.
He tried.
He did.
We talked about Sam earlier a little bit. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention about her though was like, you know, even she was still kind of over these kids. It wasn't until like the like alien monster things were like actually in the block, and she was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stick with this because numbers are better than being alone. And so, you know, she was still trying to figure out like, you know, why am I with these kids? What is So I think that was a big turning point for her there, is then her saving Moses and being like, okay, we got each other's backs. This is more important.
Yeah, because the group had a little bit of a disagreement over whether she should be able to come with them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dennis was like, no.
Yeah.
And Moses didn't really say too much, but it was Pest and Jerome that stood up for her and said, no, we need her with us.
Yeah, I think Pest was actually kind of developing a little crush on her.
I think so too.
But his excuse, yeah, he's just like, well, we need a nurse around because my leg is hurt. I need her to take care of me.
I don't want to die.
And, which, man, I love that he was great. Which, another thing, a fun thing I found out, a little tidbit about Pest, is director, you know, Joe Cornish purposely designed the character of Pest with Boba Fett from Star Wars in mind.
No way. Really?
Yes. Yep. With kind of being, you know, just this like, you know, because Boba Fett in the earlier movies was kind of flirty a little bit, and he was just kind of there and, you know, did his thing and in and out. But also like this, mainly the design, like the look of the fireworks in the backpack.
Yes.
Like that was his like, you know, reasoning for that. He was like, it looks like Boba Fett with the jetpack with the rocket, you know, coming up off the top of it. And he was like, that's a cool look. So that's what he wanted to do, which is, you know.
Well, Pest did love his pyrotechnics. He really was the king of the I think they were bottle rockets and firecrackers. And I mean, he made use of every single bit of firepower he had that wasn't actually like bullets or a gun. It was like fireworks.
Yeah, which, again, another little director choice that I saw looking through some interesting trivia about this is that, yeah, again, Cornish wanted to make sure that the character of Hi-Hats was the only one that actually used a gun.
And
because he wanted to paint him as, okay, this is the villain of the story.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I mean, it would have made sense for any of these other kids to have been carrying an actual gun in the, you know, the situation in the life that they're living. But he didn't want to blur those lines. He wanted to like paint that picture of like, no, Hi-Hats is the one that has a gun because he's bad. And these kids, even though they may make a lot of bad choices, at the end of the day, they're the good guys.
And they're still kids. They're still kids, which was, it was difficult to see Moses when they had to go to Ron's because they wanted to put the female that they didn't know at the time, the female alien creature, they wanted to put it at Ron's because it was the safest place, because the weed room had a lot of security. It's Ron's weed room where there's weed. I think there was a quote in there.
Oh, I've got the quote. We'll get to it later.
All right, good. I knew you would. I knew that you would have the quote.
Yeah.
I knew you would. There's so many that it's just impossible to.
Yeah.
I mean, we could quote the whole movie and it would just, for sure. So they wanted to take it there, and that's where, when we actually get to Ron's, who was played by the wonderful Nick Frost.
Oh, it's always great. Always great to see him.
Oh my goodness. Perfect.
Which the long hair that he had was for real. Not a wig, not anything like that, because he had just come off filming the movie Paul. And so he still had the long hair from that.
Yes. So we get to see, you know, we might as well talk a little bit about Ron and his favorite, reliable, posh customer named Brewis, who was very intelligent, although mostly high for the entire movie, I think.
Yeah.
For the most part. We get to meet them, and I remember, or actually, no, I have it in here. So we get to meet Ron, and the guides bring in the female alien creature, which I feel like we should have started the podcast by naming these things, since no one else had named them. Otherwise, we're just going to call them the alien monster creature, off and on.
Big gorilla wolf motherfuckers.
Yes, yes. So Ron actually says maybe there was a party at the zoo and a monkey fucked a fish. And I'm like, well, you never know. Never, and then right
Gorilla
after that,
wolf.
he's like, oh, Brewis, you want to buy some weed?
GWMs.
Like, it's no big deal. No big deal. So they actually get there, and Ron takes them into the weed room so they can talk to Hi-Hats and his little buddy Tonks.
Yeah.
Hi-Hats has his own wonderful little song called Get That Snitch, and we get to see a performance of it.
Quite
right
a few
there.
times.
Quite a few
A few times throughout the movie. When he's driving later, he's got it playing.
I mean, he can't get
he's
enough
proud
of
himself.
it. Yeah, really. It was funny at that point because I remember the first time I watched the film, I was convinced that the female creature was still alive and that as soon as Hi-Hats put those sunglasses on it, it was gonna like scream or something. Because I'm seeing so many of these creature movies that you just expect something like that to happen. And so we learn a bit about Hi-Hats and him being, the bad guy, really.
Yeah.
Because he kind of just decides that Moses is going to work for him and gives him some drugs in a cigarette box and said, I need 300 back from this. Moses, I mean, how do you say no to that?
You don't.
You can't say no. I mean, and all Moses is really trying to do is, I just want to leave this thing here. And Tonks thinks it's a puppet and that Moses is this great puppeteer. Oh, you're really good at making these puppets. And it's like, not a puppet, buddy. Not a puppet.
Tonks figures it out later on that they're definitely not puppets.
Yes. Yes, he does. Yes, he does in the most interesting of ways. Yeah. So Hi-Hats is definitely the bad guy. And we start to learn this. I think right from the get-go you realize that he's not a good guy.
But you find out he's pretty unstable pretty quickly on. Like,
yes.
This whole idea of, like, marking his turf and, like, taking vengeance on, like, the smallest things. I mean, I'm sure that is a, like, expensive car that got crushed. So I'd be mad. I get that.
That's I think it was a Beamer.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, I can get that. But then, like, just for the rest of the movie, his only, like, mission is just to kill Moses over his car. Like, that's...
Exactly. And one, Moses wasn't even driving. And two, there were aliens involved, but he doesn't even want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear it because Pest tries to explain it, which we'll talk about later in the quote section because it's an incredible quote.
Basically, threatens, like, say the word alien one more time and I will kill you. Like, don't even...
Like, don't shoot them. No. And poor Sam is just, like, not even realizing what she's in the middle of. I mean, it's just such a situation. And then they tried to tell him that there was something behind him. He makes Tonks go look by putting a gun to his head. Yeah. And Tonks goes, and the next thing you know, Tonks is dead. And even though Hi-Hats saw it, he still doesn't believe. Yeah,
he's, like, still convinced that, like, the kids had something to do with it. Like, oh, it's one of their dogs or something. Like,
Pogo has become a zombie. He's come back as a big gorilla-like motherfucker. That's going to take
wolf mother GWMs. GWMF.
GWMs. Okay. No. Yes, we need to trademark that, Pake. That's good. GWMs. So he just continues to act like the kids are making this all up, and they're not making it up. It's ridiculous. And so he's after them. He actually at one point uses mayhem and probs to find them, saying, hey, I know about the aliens. I'm going to go. I'm back up. That's not the truth. That he still wanted to kill Moses. And so he gets his poor two guys that bring him the Beamer to go up in the elevator with him. Unfortunately, the other two people didn't make it out. And then I think Hi-Hats finally realizes the aliens are real, but he still is only focused on killing Moses. So.
Yeah, man, was talking to Probs and Mayhem. He's just waving his gun around. I did have a little note about that. It was like the look on Prob's face when the gun is just in his face for a second. He's like, his eyes get so big. He's like, like, I don't like this.
Yeah. It's like, maybe you might want to rethink your status as tough guys on the block. And go home and do what Moses said. Go home, be safe, do your homework.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that they would ever listen to that.
I don't know.
It's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Let's see what else we got on characters and stuff. I have just like a random note under different character stuff. I did notice they say "get me" a lot. Get me?
Yes.
Which is, I mean, I'm sure it's just like a very South London slang thing, which a lot of this is. I mean, it makes sense. It's probably kind of like, understand, comprende.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
So maybe our English listeners let us know, because I kind of dig that saying. That's cool.
Me too.
And I might be throwing my own like South London kind of accent in every now and then in this episode, and I apologize in advance for it.
But it can't help.
Send any complaints and hate mail to Daphne. No.
You can send it to me, but I'll just send it to Pake.
Okay, we'll forward it. And then I'll send it to Ben. No.
Yes. Yes. No. We'll pretend that it's all for the San Andreas episode.
Yes.
And we'll just forward it to him. Yeah. I think that's a great plan.
Yeah, perfect.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about Brewis.
Yeah.
Because I really liked him too. He was one of my favorite characters. He's the one who was watching the documentary on TV that talks about the female moth releasing a pheromone that can reach up to a mile away. And that's what helped him start to put the pieces together.
Yeah. Well, he had a background in that too, because he even says, he studied zoology at uni.
At uni.
University. College. For us Americans.
And he had never seen anything like this.
But this is still something, he's never seen anything like this before. Nobody he knows has seen anything like this before.
Yeah. And he talks about it. Maybe they're like spores that the female goes ahead and finds a location and then releases the scent or the transmission or whatever to bring all the males. Well, the males all came along. Mm-hmm. I don't think they were too happy about what happened to their female.
No.
Not pleased. Not pleased at all. But Brewis, he tells a little story about being busted once by his dad and he lost his allowance. Mm-hmm. And he actually says he thinks he'll lose testicles if he's busted again. I'm like, I've never heard it referred to that way or them referred to that way. Pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And we learn at one point too that he has his dad's car, except he finds out that the car was what he thinks is petrol bombed. It wasn't. It was just the aliens landing.
Yeah.
It's what they do.
He finds himself here at the block with everybody else because he's the rich guy, like, well, heir of a rich guy, kid of a rich guy who spends all of his money on drugs. But he just happens to be here as one of Ron's customers when all this goes down. And now he's stuck here defending himself with the rest of the group.
There's also one point that he and Ron I wrote in my notes, get proper high.
Yeah.
While everything is going on, talking about the alien invasion. But they're just sitting there on the couch and they're talking about it like it's no big deal, like nothing's happening, nobody's dying. They're just having this great little conversation, high as a kite.
Yep.
It's like, oh, all right. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I guess if you got to get through this in some way, might as well, right?
You might as well.
Yep. It gets in the way a little bit once they have to kind of come up with the plan where Moses has to lead all of them down to his flat so he can blow it up.
Yes.
And it's like, well, who's going to do it? And Brewis is like, well, I'm too high. Which I love them past is like, me too. Likewise.
I'd be happy to do it if I wasn't too stoned.
Yeah.
And the look in his eyes, it was like, oh, goodness.
Because Pest had been toking it up quite a little bit too. Because even like when they were in the girls' flat, and they're like, "You don't do that over here. Go over to the window." And he's like, "It's medicinal. I'm in pain.
I'm in pain.
It's a painkiller. My leg." You know.
He was gonna milk that.
Yeah.
I mean, it did look painful.
Oh, that was pretty brutal. There's like a whole blood trail when they're dragging him through the lobby. Like, it was a bad bite. Like, I'll give that to him. He deserves all the pampering and weed he can get for a little bit. It's fine.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. He definitely needed it. But I don't think we can talk about the characters without mentioning the ones that we actually lost along the way. Because we did lose a couple of members of Moses' gang.
Yeah.
Poor Dennis is decapitated.
That was brutal.
I questioned why he put the helmet on. Because that just made it easier for them to, like, rip his head off. But I didn't think of, that's not, I questioned it after. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have put the helmet on. So Dennis is the first one to go while they're still at the girls' flat.
Yeah.
And then when the group is trying to get up to Ron's weed room, that's when Jerome gets separated from the group because they used the fireworks and there was a lot of smoke and he just gets disoriented. Yeah. And then he loses his knife and then he's killed. And at one point, he's reaching out for Pest, and then he's dragged away. And it's actually Sam that drags Pest away to get him to safety. Yeah. Which was another opportunity where she actually stepped up and helped keep people safe. Yeah. But then she also is the one, due to the others being high, who gets the honor of going down to flat 191 to turn on the gas. Yep. And they have to
so
use
much
the light.
She does for these kids.
I know. And that was, they used a black light, right?
Like a UV light,
or
yeah.
Which a UV light. I mean, so they used a UV light to make sure she didn't have any of the pheromones on her. Because when they go into the weed room to kind of hide out, that's when they realize that Moses is completely covered in the female pheromone, blood, whatever. Yeah. And that's what the males are reacting to. And so that's when they realize that they are that the alien monster creatures are reacting to anyone who either came into contact with the female alien and got her scent or blood on them, or someone who came into contact with Moses. Yeah. And got it from him. So they realize that, the person who goes down there might be okay because they're not going to be looking for them. Yeah. So after they checked Sam to make sure she didn't have any traces of it on her, and then she was able to kind of just quietly sneak past them, which I was wondering about that, and I have that in my notes as far as, because they're tracking them with this pheromone. It was like, so they're completely blind to people who don't have it, but like I assume like they can still hear. And like, if they're touched, then they're going to react. Yes. Because, I mean, they do kill those police officers way early in the beginning, and there's no pheromones involved there, but... No, other than they arrested Moses, and they might have gotten it on there could have been that. Were putting him in. Yeah. Yeah. But even before this, our good buddy Hi-Hats, in his final, acts, where he actually holds a gun to Ron's head when the boys and Sam get to the flat. And he's there, and he basically said, I could have made you, but now I'm going to make you dead, or some variation of that. And then all of the creatures are behind. And everyone's looking at them, telling him he doesn't listen because he wants to kill Moses. And then all the creatures come in. That death was pretty gruesome, too. Yeah. Like, ripped his face off. Yes. Yeah, that real gruesome death. Real gruesome death. And I thought, okay, there's your comeuppance. You've been a real jerk. You wanted to hurt Moses. You weren't contributing anything positive to the neighborhood. So, okay. Now's your time to go. And I was fine with that. The Nedry of Attack the Block. Yes. Yes, he is. He is. Oh, there's always one pig
There's
in
always
every
a Nedry.
movie. There's always a Nedry.
Yeah.
In every movie.
All right. Well, while we're talking about that stuff, we've been talking about the aliens, creatures, monsters.
Yes.
GWMFs. I don't know.
GWMFs. Yes. GWMFs. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think unless you've got some more to talk about specific human characters, I think we're good there.
You know, the only thing I want to say is I thought some of those girls were badasses.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've already talked about some of the things that they did. And I did love that Dimples sang Ready or Not by the Fugees.
Yes.
Because that's a song that's been coming up in some of my regular life outside of podcasting.
Yeah, we have our Podcastica, and Pirate Core Entertainment, and other networks, podcast network, friend group that we all co-mingle with, and we've been playing a lot of Among Us together online.
Yes.
Every week. and yeah, that always comes up, especially because we play a version of Among Us that people who don't know. I'm not going to get too in depth on it, but there's a version that which is tag, where you know who the imposter is, and you just can't report bodies, so you're trying to do tasks while they're killing people. And usually that song comes up then with Ready or Not.
Yep. Someone says Ready or Not, and then usually Amelie will start singing the whole thing.
Yep.
And it's just when I heard it in this movie, I'm just like, oh, it just takes me back to
yes,
the day before when we were playing Among Us.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all I have on that. So I am happy to move on to talking a little bit about the creatures, if that's the direction you were headed.
All right, perfect. Yeah, actually, I think they did a really good job with them as far as even like when they would arrive, because the jump scares in this movie they used for them actually worked really well, mainly at the beginning when the one attacks Moses in the car. Yes. And then when Biggs is looking out of the dumpster he's in, and it looks clear, and then bam, there he is. It's like, I jumped a little bit on both of those moments, and I was like, damn it, they got me. Like, I'm usually pretty good with this.
Glow-in-the-dark teeth will get you every time.
Yeah.
I mean, and they really were very black, very dark. But those teeth, that's how you knew they were coming for you.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they were, man, and we covered it mostly while talking about other scenes with different characters, a lot of the notes that I have. But yeah, they were really good at just kind of like appearing, like even when it wasn't a jump scare, but like while they're in the girls' flat, when they're at Tia's. And it's like somebody just happens to look out the window and is like, oh shit, what is that? And then there's like two of them just sitting there, like watching everybody. Or the ones behind hi-hats where there's like 20 of them.
I know. Oh, they were, it's interesting. And this is usually something I would include in our production notes, but I feel like in order to talk about these characters, the creatures, we really have to talk about some of the things that they did in order to create them. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have a lot of origin story on them. We just know what Brewis decided likely happened. So, I figure I'll drop in a few of those things. Cool. So overall, the creatures were kind of based on aliens from the side of a Space Invaders, like actual console game. Uh-huh. The ones that if you went to an arcade, it was old Space Invaders, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And when he started working on it, there were only 2 of the gorilla-like suits that were made with animatronic jaws. It's really kind of strange. Like the black fur that they use doesn't reflect any light at all, so they were very specific about it. The claws, the bioluminescent jaws, and some movement was added in post-production. They have no eyes, and they hunt and find their mates using an amplified sense of smell. Yeah. Which is kind of what we talked about. Mm-hmm.
Now, you do know that you said there were costumes because they were worn, and actually, it was not CGI in that effect that, like, when the monsters are there chasing down the kids and everything, they really had somebody in a costume.
Yes.
Which made it a lot better for the kids, but do you know who was wearing that costume?
No, but I have a feeling you're going to tell us.
I will. a very well-known monster costume wearer and motion capture actor by the name of Terry Notary, who is most also well known for his other motion capture and costume roles, portraying Kong in Kong Skull Island. He was Rocket in the newer Planet of the Apes series.
Okay, yep.
And also did Groot in the last two Infinity War and Avengers Endgame.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That is wonderful. At first I thought you were going to say Andy Serkis.
It's not Andy Serkis.
No, I don't think Andy Serkis was involved with this one.
Yeah, no, there's two names really that come to my mind whenever you think motion capture and stuff. There's Andy Serkis, number one. Terry Notary is number two.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yes.
That is cool that he was involved with this movie. I like, and we've talked about this before, that practical effects will hold up much better than CGI, because over time CGI looks dated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the practical effects in this were really, really good.
Yeah. Oh, very, very good. Honestly, I didn't have any moments where like something looked off or cheesy to me.
No. Those glow-in-the-dark jaws.
Yeah.
I mean,
the first time we see that, it's really cool because like you're right there with the kids and their mindset. We're like, I can see his eyes. And then it takes a moment. I was like, I don't think those are eyes. And then when the mouth opens and it's like, oh, that is badass. Like,
oh, so good. And they sounded like the creatures themselves sounded a little interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did was they used like they were called the echolocation noises.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a combination of like dolphin sonar mixed digitally with the grunts and the snarls of dozens of other animals.
Sounded like
an
angry goose. I picked up on that. I don't know if they used that. I didn't look, but I would be surprised.
I don't know. They also use like a woman screaming. Like that was all mixed in together. So maybe they just put it in a digital blender, mixed it all together and said, okay, this is what it's going to be.
It was menacing. It was a good.
Yeah. So, and they did use some puppets. They did for like the smaller hairless female alien. That was a puppet.
Except for the opening scene when we first see it where it's walking away.
Yes.
There was a smaller like stunt woman that was wearing that at that point.
Yes. Yes. For the rest of it where they were carrying it around, it was after they had killed it. It was, I think one of the things that Joe Cornish really wanted to stick to using CG effects only when they were absolutely necessary. And I think he achieved that with this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Worked very well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They were creepy. They were scary.
Cool. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else to say about our GWMFs, then hit us up with those production notes.
All right. There was a lot of information on this movie. When I started researching it, I was kind of blown away at all the little details that I was able to uncover. And so I kind of had to cull the list down to, I think, what are the most important ones or the most fun. Just because, I mean, there were just so many. So Joe Cornish, the director, was inspired to make the film after being mugged in real life one night. And he noticed at the time that the 5 young assailants were just as scared as he was.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of was like, okay, yeah, all right. Here's the beginning of a story. He did a lot of in-depth language research to accurately convey the way the street kids in London speak. He also interviewed the kids to ask them, what kind of weapons would you use if an alien invasion occurred? So we had like the fireworks and the baseball bat and the kitchen knife
I had that in my notes.
Samurai sword.
Yeah, I had that in my notes that we kind of missed. Where I have, as they're going down the stairs and everybody's popping into their own flat. As I noticed that, Jerome grabs a machete.
Yep.
Biggs gets, it looked like it was like a chain. Like some chains from somewhere is what it looked like. Pest grabs a bat and then some fireworks. And he, very smartly, because his like Nana is sitting there in the living room, so he walks in with a limp to where she's like, you know what happened? It's like, oh, I twisted my ankle riding my bike or whatever. But he did that on purpose to where when he slides the bat down his pants, to where then it's going to make him walk like that. It looks natural.
Yes.
Like I was like, man, this kid's clever.
He's very clever. There's a reason why he was my favorite character, and that's just another reason.
Mm-hmm. And then Dennis goes in and grabs a samurai sword. He grabs a smaller one first, heads off, and then turns around, puts it back, and grabs the biggest one instead. Which
you want a big samurai sword when you're dealing with this predicament. Then, you definitely want that.
Unfortunately, also has to take his dog out too, which did not end well. Pogo.
Yes, poor Pogo. R.I.P. Pogo.
And then, Probs and Mayhem have to tag along too, and they each have their own guns. One of them just has to be a super soaker, and the other one just like a little toy pop gun, like a cap gun.
Yes.
Which Moses thinks is real until it's too late.
But they have the firecrackers to go with the gas-filled super soaker.
It worked out great.
Very effective when taking on the aliens. So, also, cool about this movie is the film was pretty much shot in chronological order, which is not how films are normally done. Like, they break it up.
Yeah. Mainly why things are shot out of order is for location usage. You film everything in one location, then move to the next location. So if the story makes you move back and forth a lot, well, it saves you the time of having to move around the production from place to place. You do everything in one spot, then go to the next and do it.
Yeah. So the film itself was set in a fictional neighborhood that is said to be located in Brixton, which is a district of London. There's no aerial view of the Wyndham Estates, even though you might expect there to be at some point. Because Wyndham Estates doesn't exist, and it is actually a composite of various council estates across London, so they couldn't really show you, because it's all made up of a bunch of different things.
Yeah, they filmed all over the city, so it's...
Yeah. Wyndham Estates is actually... It's a reference to an English science fiction writer, John Wyndham, who's known for two really cool books, one being The Day of the Triffids and The Midwich Cuckoos, which was made into a movie in the 60s, I believe, and then also made into one later. And I believe it was one of the last films that Christopher Reeve made before his accident, and it was called Village of the Damned. And there are other nods in the location, street names and such, that were, dedicated or put in because they were the names of other well-known British sci-fi writers. So nice. I feel like Cornish was definitely trying to give nods to some of the folks that inspired him over his life. So Edgar Wright, who is also one of our favorites.
Absolutely.
He was an executive producer on Attack the Block. Stephen Price was the composer for several Edgar Wright films, including The World's End and Baby Driver. He was also a music editor on a little film called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It may or may not be the favorite film of one of the co-hosts of this podcast.
I wonder who. Edgar Wright's my favorite director, and Scott Pilgrim is my favorite movie. Baby Driver comes in very close, even with Kevin Spacey. Brings it down a lot of points, but then also it's so freaking good that it still stays way up there high because so good. And a lot of the reason those movies are good is because of the music. So
yes,
Stephen freaking Price.
Yep, and Edgar Wright knows how to put the pieces together when it comes to films. He understands the parts and pieces that have to go into it, not just the actors or the script. It's got to be the music, the location, everything. And he pays such close attention to those details.
Yeah.
And that's why his films, I think, are so successful.
Music is a character. He treats it like a character.
Yes. Which we've talked about before, how a location can be a character. And music also can be a character. Yeah. It's incredibly important. And I feel like Stephen Price really did a great job on putting the music to the scenes in this film. It was great.
Yeah.
And then rounding everything out, the effects were done by a Swedish effects house named Fido. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Awesome.
Lots.
There's a lot of really cool stuff about this movie. It was a great one that I had not dove into, but it is fun now that I have, and I'm really glad I did.
I'm so glad.
It's a good thing about doing this podcast is it brings us into the worlds of some movies that we may have overlooked.
Yes.
So
there have been a couple so far that I've had never seen and was, able to jump into and learn more about to cover for this podcast. And there were also one or two that I revisited and changed my opinion on.
Yeah.
After watching it a second time for this podcast, because, and I think we've talked about this before, when you're podcasting on a film, you tend to look at it a little bit differently because you're digging into all the little details, and sometimes it's the backstories or the little trivia tidbits, and other times it's just you have missed something in the first time you watched the film, and in watching it a second time, you see things differently or learn more or see a detail that you missed that just connects everything so you enjoy it so much more.
Yeah. Podcasting has taught me, like, it puts you in a different mindset watching these things where you're watching it in a very analytical way. Not necessarily a critical way,
right.
but analytical as far as you're paying a little bit more attention to character arcs and character, reasons why they're doing stuff there. And the story in a whole is like, okay, well, why does this lead to this,
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah.
cool.
You learn a lot. I've learned a lot so far. This is actually, I believe, our 20th episode tonight that we're recording.
Nice.
I'll probably take this out, but this is number 20. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's been a lot that I've learned over the last 4.5 months doing this podcast. And I'm really excited about the movies that we have on the schedule to cover in the next 4.5 months.
Yes. Lots of good stuff.
Lots of good stuff.
All right. Well, now we get to a really fun part of the podcast, which is the quotes. And
oh, my goodness.
I know there's some good ones.
So many quotes.
So
it's so hard to pick. It's so hard.
Yeah, because we had a bunch of them just sprinkled through just our conversation of the movie.
Yes.
But which ones did we pick that were special enough to make it to just this section?
When I picked quotes from this movie, all I could think is, okay, I'm going to pick these, and I know Pake's going to pick some good ones. Hopefully we got all the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so hard to know because this movie was filled with one-liners that you just want to honestly use.
Yeah.
Because they're so funny.
All right. So I'll let you start, Daphne. Surprise, surprise.
Uh-huh. It's always me. It's not a surprise anymore. So I wanted to start a little bit with the world of Ron. When he's first meeting the first alien that the boys killed, he looks at them and says, "It smells like a shit did a shit."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes. And then a little bit later, he said, "Well, dear lads, you've discovered a species hitherto unknown to science, quite possibly non-terrestrial in origin, and you've kicked its fucking head in." Again, I'm not doing the justice to reading these, that you have to have the full Nick Frost effect to be able to fully embrace it. And then the last one that I picked was, "Even if it is an alien invasion, they're 4 foot high, blind, and got kicked to death by a bunch of kids. We've got nothing to worry about." And I feel like this was a quote that he said to Brewis while they were sitting on the couch, high as a kite.
Mm-hmm.
And my second one is, after Moses and company have escaped the aliens in the police van and they crash into Hi-Hats' BMW, they're trying to explain to Hi-Hats what happened. And Moses says, "It was an accident, bruv." And then Pest. Oh, God love Pest. Nah, trust, bruv. There's bear creatures chasing us. Big alien gorilla wolf motherfuckers, I swear. Some creature fell from outer space, then jumped Moses, and he boarded. And now its brethren have come down in force blood. Then Moses got shifted by the feds, and them things attacked the bully van and savaged the Bluefoot. So we jacked the van, and we's running for our lives right now, 'cause believe. And I had to pick this because it says, we's running for our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, run for your lives. So those are the quotes that I picked. Pake, I am dying to know what you picked.
All right. So my first one, because they're always in chronological order just because I have them down, but first one, I don't even know who said the quote. I could probably go back and rewatch and maybe pick up on a voice now that I knew them better, but I didn't do that because I'm being lazy, but I had too many other rabbit holes to go down. But at the beginning, when the first alien, like, meteor type thing, whatever, slams into the car when they're mugging Sam, and one of the kids, it was probably pest, but I don't know for sure. Somebody's bombing us, mate. So yes, that's what's happening. That makes sense. Goodness. And then my next one is from Probs. Just kind of, it shows how young he is. Like, it's one of those classic little kid things where, like, they have no idea what they're saying, but it sounds whatever, because they're giving him a hard time about his age and his stuff. And he goes, "Go suck your mom," which they all laugh about it because it's like, yeah, that makes no sense, but okay. No sense. Okay, cool. Next one I have is while Pest is getting his leg worked on, or right before that, and they're trying to get Sam to help out with that, and Moses says, "No feds," and then Pest backs, follows it up. It's like, you'd be better off calling the Ghostbusters, love.
Oh yes.
Which
oh yeah, I remember that clearly. In her living room. Yeah. Yes.
And then the last two that I have are ones that you mentioned earlier, but I have these. Yeah, Sam is looking at the gun that Mayhem is carrying and says, "Is that real? He looks 6." And he goes, "I'm 9.5."
Oh goodness.
And then the last one, they're in the elevator and they're talking about, we got to go to Ron's weed room. And Sam goes, "What's Ron's weed room?" To where Brewis just goes, "It's a big room full of weed. And it's Ron's."
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I feel like I need to watch this movie more often. Because there are just so many things. Yes. I mean, it's serious and there's aliens and people die. But there are just things about it that are, very humorous.
Yes.
Just the quotes. I don't even need to see it. If I could just, just listening to it, I'll be entertained.
All right. Well, then we get to the next part, which is also fun, even if it means nothing. The rankings.
And one of these days, I'm going to actually chart the rankings that we've given movies.
Oh, God. Just we can be like, what were we thinking? Like, how is this one higher than this one? But this one's way lower, but this is this and that. Because it's all just... Yeah.
Well, we know what our lowest ranked film is.
And that one's going to be hard to beat as far as how low a score can go.
It is. Yes. But yeah, maybe we'll do an episode and we'll re-rank everything the way it should be. In order.
Yeah, just a special episode where we're like, let's fix our rankings and actually...
Let's fix our rankings.
Like, put them in their correct spots. And maybe when we've done so many episodes, we can be like, okay, let's just do a episode where we recap our like top 10 movies of the list each or something. That could be fun.
Yes, I think that would be great.
Yeah. The road so far.
And this is just me prologuing the inevitable in that I have to go first with the rankings.
Yes.
Pake likes having that control. All right. So I'm not going to do a long diatribe. I love this movie. It's super fun. It doesn't stand up to some of the other movies that we've covered, but I love it. And so I'm giving it a 7.5.
Wow. I figured you'd be higher.
No,
because I am. I'm way higher, but
what?
But
you are?
Again, everything is just. It's.
I was afraid
none of it's
go
comparable.
Higher.
Just because like this is usually just how I feel right after watching a movie without even thinking about what I've ranked everything else, because I don't remember what I've ranked everything else. So it's just at that moment what I'm feeling, and I gave this one an 8.4 because I had a blast.
Oh goodness. I just didn't think I could logically give it more, as much as I love it.
8.4 fresh pairs of Calvin Kleins.
Oh, 7.5 samurai swords. Oh, last week it was something else.
Mm-hmm.
Boats through buildings.
Yeah, that might be a new fun thing. It's just to add something like that.
Yeah.
Ben might have
That's what
started
we'll do.
something.
Yes. Yeah, I think we'll start doing that. Yeah. You can pick something, I'll pick something. It just makes the rankings even more fun.
There we go. Since they don't mean anything anyway.
They don't mean anything, so they might as well, and then at the end of the year we can say, okay, which was our favorite thing that we picked?
Mm-hmm.
Is it 7.5 samurai swords, or is it 8.4 fresh pairs of Calvin Kleins? Or boats through buildings, or, yeah.
All right, Daphne, now it's time to get to some feedback. We have just a little bit, be a quick one today. All we have is some audio feedback, a voice call from Steve, which, I mean, let's face it, that if we got to have something, I'm glad it's that, right?
Gotta have feedback from Steve, and I am very curious as to what Steve thinks of this movie. So I feel like we should not even, delay it. We should just, dive right in as quickly as possible. Okay, let's hear what Steve has to say.
Hey, Pake and Daphne, this is Steve, and I just started my DVD copy of Attack the Block, and I'm actually watching the previews because it's been so long since I've watched a movie with previews, but I'm not going to watch all these previews. I don't need to see the Columbiana preview and whatever's next. All right. Wait, one of the benefactors of this film is the UK lottery? Huh. I'm not even going to try to, duplicate or even identify this London slang. Bruv? Wow, their Miranda rights sound very similar to ours. He does have a point. If you're going to make up a lie, why would you make up aliens? I mean, aliens? Come on. I guess they saved the block and the planet. Yeah, they saved the block. Okay. Very cool. I know them. They're my neighbors. They protected me. Oh, great. I need to revisit this movie a little more often. So, pretty good. Protect the block. Jodie Whittaker, John Boyega. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. I'm glad you like it, bro. I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
He actually owns it.
Yes.
On DVD. That is impressive.
Right.
Glad that he liked it.
Well, to go ahead and throw out to what else is going on in the podcast universe, if you'd like to hear more of Steve, you can listen to his podcast, Panels to Pixels, him and Mark. And they just released an episode covering the 2020 movie Arch Enemy, which I don't know what that is, if I'm being very honest, but I'm going to have to check it out for them and see what they're...
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is either.
Yes.
But I'm going to have to check it out because it seems like it might be interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure we will be talking to Mark and Steve soon, and they can give us the down low on why we need to watch that movie and check it out.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a great reason. But yeah. And then, of course, also on Strange Indeed, always be shouting that out because they're still covering the CBS All Access show, The Stand. And episode 4 is out now, and 5 will be recorded this week, and I'll be back on there. So it'll be good to jump back over and hang out with Rima and Ben, record another episode for The Stand. So if you're a Stephen King fan, check it out.
Absolutely. Yes. And I am a Stephen King fan living in Maine. How can you not be a Stephen King fan? So I really have enjoyed their coverage of The Stand, and it's always cool when you guest on there because it's kind of like you get to catch up on, your thoughts on some of the previous stuff too. So I enjoy that. It's good.
Yep. And based off of what it looks like the next episode is going to be, based really just off the title alone and speculation from Ben and Rima, this is going to be a good episode for me to get back onto because I think we're finally going to get some characters that I've been waiting to see. So I think it'll be really fun.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Definitely.
And then, speaking of coming up on podcast, Daphne, why don't you tell everybody what is coming up next on Run for Your Lives?
Well, next week we are going to be talking all things The Descent. the British adventure horror film directed by Neil Marshall, released on August 4th, 2006. And we were super stoked to have our good friend Jason Kabassi join us for this episode. For those of you who don't know, Jason is, quote, the Podfather and host of the Walking Dead cast, which is a podcast about the TV show The Walking Dead. It's been running for over a decade. And little known fact, it was due to this podcast and the Patreon group that Pake and I became friends and started Run for Your Lives.
Yes. So it was awesome. It's such an honor to have Jason on. And if you listen next week, you'll get to hear me gush about that and
there's just a little.
Say a lot of nice things about him to see if I can make him embarrassed before we start.
He does gush. Yeah. Great. Peg does gush a bit. But it's a lot of fun. It was great to break it down. Jason has some insight into some of the parts of the movie that we don't have. And so it's kind of cool to hear him talk about those parts and pieces.
Oh, yeah. It was a great one. Definitely recommend checking it out. And then checking out Jason. There's another little podcast shout out that we can start adding to here. Check out the Walking Dead cast. If you're a fan of The Walking Dead, there is no better podcast out there, I don't think. Just Jason and Lucy are killing it, and Walking Dead should be starting back up this next month with kind of a little extended season 10 episodes, so it's great. And then they cover other little movies and stuff kind of every other week during the downtime that Walking Dead's not airing, so they just covered Host, which is the Shudder horror movie, and so check it out. Yeah.
Looking forward to, once Walking Dead gets back on, hearing them break it down, because they always have clever insight into some of the things that happen. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Definitely. And then if you want to submit any kind of theories or feedback or thoughts, comments to us on The Descent or Attack the Block or any other movie that we've covered or the one that you want us to cover, then you can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/runforyourlivespodcast. You can email us or send us a voicemail like Steve at runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at RFYL Podcast or Instagram at Run For Your Lives Podcast. And if you're enjoying the show, tell your friends, share the love, send them all over the place because we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Audible, YouTube, anywhere you can find podcasts, we're there. But if you want to find somewhere that has links to all the social media, all the podcast players, everything out there, you can just go to our website, which is runforyourlivespodcast.com. And while you're at Apple Podcasts, if you go through there, make sure to go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and share the love that way. That really helps us get our numbers and views out there.
Wow. And with that, you know what? We have reached the end of our show. As always, thanks everyone for listening. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake. And if you have to run, especially from one of them big alien gorilla wolf motherfuckers, you better run for your lives, bruv.
Bye-bye.